Hello and welcome to Niche References, where I yap about my niche interests so that I don't annoy my friends and family with them. My name is Chris, and today I'm going to be yapping about all the media that I've been consuming this summer. So I've been MIA for a little bit here, and that's because I hit a point that I kind of feared I would hit, but I hit it pretty early on here. I tend to vary between A, being very, very deep obsessed with one of my niche interests, and B, kind of floating between my niche interests, not really picking one, just bouncing between them at random. The former of these is very easy to create content around, get deep into whatever niche I'm currently obsessed with, and just talk it to death. But the latter is very difficult because how do I pick a direction when I'm bouncing between niches? And unfortunately, it is where I've found myself for about the past month or so. But summer is coming to a close, so the timing is kind of perfect for me to just sit down and yap about all the niches that I've been bouncing between for the entire summer. So without any further preamble, let's jump in. I'm mostly going to be going chronologically from earlier in the summer until now. So the first major milestone of the summer for me is that I finally finished one of my all-time favorite TV shows, which is Community. Now, this may sound a little bit odd because you'd think if it's one of my favorite TV shows, I would have already finished it since it completed nearly a decade ago. But true to my many niches, I'm not great at completing shows. And I'm also not the hugest scripted TV viewer. So finally finishing a show is very rare for me, and it's a big accomplishment. And this one was a big struggle for me personally because my favorite character actually leaves a whole season and a half before the show's over, and I never really wanted to watch past that point. But I finally did. So if you're unfamiliar with Community, it was part of NBC's kind of juggernaut lineup of comedy shows back in the late aughts, early 2010s. It was alongside The Office, Parks and Rec, 30 Rock. And Community was always kind of the dark horse of that lineup, the least popular of the four because it can get a bit conceptual and weird at times. It follows an eclectic group of community college students who come together to form a study group, but eventually just become a found family for each other. One of its major selling points is its conceptual episodes where they pay homage to massive blockbuster films like Apollo 13 and Star Wars. There's a stop-motion animated Christmas feature, a zombie episode, a video game episode, a Dungeons and Dragons episode. The list goes on and on. My personal favorite episode is actually the Apollo 13 episode. I'm not a big space girly, but the KFC Winnebago being a space simulator gets me every time. It's such a good episode. Community definitely has its major highs and major lows. When it's good, it's great. When it's bad, the characters keep me coming back. I actually started watching this because I'm a big fan of Joel McHale. I was a viewer of The Soup back in the day. He's kind of technically our protagonist, despite this definitely being an ensemble cast. And if I'm honest, Joel McHale's character, Jeff, is probably deep down in my heart still my favorite character. He's the one that I often find myself relating to the most. But in my opinion, the heart of the show is the relationship between Troy and Abed. I love the relationship that they form throughout the show. They're my favorites. They're the heart and soul of the show. It helps that Abed is such a unique character and Troy is by far the most popular and lovable character. He's the one that I always say is my favorite character, even though, as I mentioned, deep down in my heart, I know it is Jeff. So I've now finally finished the show after years of just rewatching my favorite episodes. It's a little bittersweet for me because I do feel like it did taper off at the end, but I'm really glad to have finally finished it. So that's it for Community. Next up is a big summer staple for me. For the past decade in my household, summer has meant one thing and one thing only: Big Brother. Yes, it is in fact still on, and yes, I do obsess over it every single summer. If you're unfamiliar, Big Brother is a social strategy competition similar to Survivor. It's kind of Survivor's sister show, but instead of living on the beach for a month, the contestants live in a house for 3 months, during which they will compete for power, form alliances, and vote each other out. During those 3 months, there are 24/7 live feeds of the house that you can watch online, so you can watch the backstabbing and betrayal in real time, which is the main selling point of the show, to be honest. Big Brother tends to kind of take over my life every summer, especially at the beginning of the season. Cast Drop Day is especially big for me because I am currently on a 4-year streak of correctly predicting the winner of Big Brother before they even set foot into the house. From Big Brother 22 in 2020 through Big Brother 25 last summer, I have correctly predicted every single winner before a single person has moved into the house for the season. Literally, not a single soul on this planet cares about this streak except for myself, but I take it very seriously, I care very deeply, and I put a lot of effort into my picks every summer. No spoilers on this current season, partially because I'm a little bit behind, but I did choose Quinn as my winner pick, so make of that what you will. An important distinction to make with Big Brother is that the live feeds are the real show. The TV product these days kinda sucks, especially the first 2 episodes of this season. They were so bad, but the live feeds absolutely popped off at the beginning of the season. So this season there's a woman in the house named Angela. She's this like 50-year-old mother, grandmother. She's been dreaming of being in the Big Brother house and was so emotional about it. She was like, wow, this is my dream. She was crying in her preseason interviews. And in the very first week that she was in the house, literally day 5 of being in the house, she got so paranoid that at 8 a.m. on a Saturday morning, she had a full Karen-style meltdown in front of the entire house. She was yelling at this like 25-year-old guy named Matt, who she thinks in her words is a brat. I don't know if she knows that it's brat summer, but if she does, iconic, I guess. And this rant was the most glorious thing I've ever seen on the live feeds in the nearly 10 years that I've been watching them. When I say it was like Karen-esque, I do mean that in the truest sense of the word. She kept name-calling, calling Matt crazy eyes. She was making faces. She was about to cry, really trying to play the victim, accusing him of aggressively threatening her when, for all intents and purposes, it appears that they just had a conversation where he said that if she came after him, he would come after her. There are some really great one-liners in this like 10-minute meltdown that just give me the best giggle of my life. So I'll go ahead and insert some here for your enjoyment as well.
Crazy eyes. You have freaking crazy eyes. And for the house, for this beautiful wonder group of people.
For real?
And for the visitors that came to visit me last night. Your performance was great. Great. It was absolutely great for a low-budget movie. I really, the rest of my time here, I really just want to have fun with you guys. Except for you. Don't talk to me. Honestly, your words are shit. So you should just put it back in your ass.
Wow.
So I'm currently a bit behind on the season, and I'll get to why in a moment. But it's been a season with a lot more fluid alliances and house structure than we usually get, which is a bit of a breath of fresh air. Oftentimes at this point, we'll have some like massive, elaborate alliance running the house, and we just really don't have that this year. It's kind of fun. If you are at all interested in checking out Big Brother, personally, I would recommend starting with Big Brother 20. In my opinion, it's the best modern season of the show. There's some great gameplay. There's some fantastic drama. It's a really fun ride. That said, Big Brother 10 is my personal favorite season of the show, so that's also a decent starting point. So alongside Big Brother, another summer staple for me is the podcast Rob Has a Podcast. This podcast network was created by Rob Cesternino from Survivor the Amazon and All Stars, and it covers a huge variety of TV shows, both reality and scripted, and although I listen to their content pretty much all year, they are my go-to Big Brother coverage. Their Big Brother podcaster, Taryn Armstrong, goes live every single morning during the Big Brother season to discuss everything that's happened on the live feeds over the previous 24 hours. So he's essential viewing for those of us who want to be up to date on the live feeds, but have real lives where we can't just sit and watch them all day. They also recap every episode and have some other Big Brother podcasts throughout each week, so my schedule of content gets really packed during the summer with Big Brother and Rob Has a Podcast content. Also, very importantly, several of the podcasters on the network play games of Blood on the Clock Tower and Goose Goose Duck together nearly every weekend, which is one of the things I look forward to every single week. It is one of the highlights of my week, especially Blood on the Clock Tower. However, I discuss RHAP mostly as a segue into the new major thing that has really taken over my life lately, and that, my friends, is the YouTube show Jet Lag. So at the beginning of this season of Big Brother, RHAP did a podcast with two of the creators of Jet Lag, Ben Doyle and Adam Chase, where they made Ben and Adam watch Big Brother for the very first time. And I loved the podcast. I found Ben and Adam very funny, very entertaining, which of course led me to go and check out Jet Lag. Taryn has been watching Jet Lag for a long time and keeps recommending it, so I figured this was like the perfect opportunity to finally check it out. And check it out I did. Over the course of the past few weeks, I have gotten completely obsessed and have made it through the entirety of Jet Lag. I have now watched all of it. And I've also broken the cardinal tagline of this podcast and yapped about it incessantly to my friends, and they now watch it as well. So if you're unfamiliar, Jet Lag is a YouTube competition show created and played by Ben and Adam and Sam Denby of Windover and Half as Interesting. Each season of the show is slightly different, but they're all games centered around travel. Some examples are that they played tag across Europe, they've traveled across the US trying to claim the most states, they played Captured the Flag in Japan, things like that, where they're basically strategically traveling around a country or around the world, kind of treating it like a board game, trying to outmaneuver each other. It's very fun, the games are very cleverly crafted, and the editing, a lot of which is done by Ben and Adam themselves, is really excellent. Personally, a lot of my enjoyment of the show comes from the dynamic between the players. Ben and Adam are always paired together on team seasons, and they play really well off of each other, with Adam being very high-strung, anxious, while Ben is more laid back and goofy. But they also together have a great underdog dynamic as a team, playing off of Sam really well, who's very calculated and strategic, often to a fault. The end product is a very strategic, fun, light-hearted comfort show that is very smart without being boring, and can go from like incredibly tense and stressful to incredibly silly at the drop of a hat. Now that I've watched every season, I really want to do an episode ranking all of them, because that's just how my brain works. I love ranking things. But season 11 has like just started as I'm recording this. So I'm going to wait for this season to finish, and then I will do the ranking. It's a delight. I would recommend it to absolutely everybody. I think there's something for everyone to enjoy in the show. Personally, I would recommend starting with season 1 and going chronologically. Season 1 is Connect 4. They played Connect 4 with the western half of the US. Very fun. It's a very quick season, and it gives you a really good taste of the general vibe of the show and of the people playing it. There's also a season 0 that is an exclusive to the streaming platform Nebula, but you can circle back to that one at any given time. Also, the other day, myself and my two friends who now watch Jet Lag because I wouldn't shut up about it, we were talking about which one of each of us lines up with which member of the Jet Lag crew, like who would we be in Jet Lag basically. And all three of us are hashtag Team Ben, so we all kind of in our heart of hearts wanted to be Ben. And then my friend just looked at me and she was like, Chris, I hate to break it to you, but you're definitely Sam. And I sat there and thought about it for a minute, and I was like, you know what, actually that's completely true. If I were playing Jet Lag, I'd be taking it way too seriously and overanalyzing everything. And I accept it. I am the antagonistic villainous force, and that is a fun role to play. Not that I think Sam is actually a villain. Everyone just kind of tends to root for Ben and Adam because they're like the underdog hero team, and then Sam comes along to like foil their plans. I do enjoy all three of them quite a bit. I think their dynamic as a trio is really what makes the show really fun. But yeah, I accept my role as the antagonistic analytical force on the team. So unfortunately, I do need to move on from Jet Lag because I have other things to talk about, next of which is a video game I've been playing this summer that is an indie Japanese visual novel called Your Turn to Die. I know we're moving on from wholesome comfort content to death game. This game is kind of in the vein of Danganronpa, if you are familiar with it. That is my favorite video game franchise. You play as a high school girl named Sarah, who finds herself kidnapped and forced into a death game with a group of eccentric and perhaps untrustworthy strangers. I actually first started playing this game a few years ago because I am a huge fan of Danganronpa, but I only got a little bit of the way into it before kind of losing interest and moving on to something else. I've made a lot more progress this time, although I've kind of set it down for a little while, so I need to pick it back up again. I'm definitely enjoying it. It's just not something that I've gotten totally obsessed with, which means that it's very easy for me to put it down and never come back to it. So far, I'm finding it kind of in line with other similar games where like your choices are supposed to matter, but so far they don't seem to make huge impacts like they could. But I'm excited to find out more. I'm enjoying it. I love a death game. The big downside for me is that the game is still actually currently unfinished. There's one section left, 3B, that is still not released. It's supposed to be released soon. I don't know when. When I started playing this a few years ago, that was still the only unreleased section. So they've made like seemingly on the outside no progress on the game in the past like 2 to 3 years. I'm sure that they've been working on it behind the scenes, but nothing else has been released in that time. So I'm not super optimistic, and it is one of the reasons that I haven't finished it, but it is fun. It's definitely something that I would like to catch up on and finish once it is complete itself, but we'll see. I've kind of put it down for the time being. We'll see when I circle back to it. All right, we're moving on to kind of the current stuff floating around in my noggin, August stuff, one of which is the Olympics. So the Olympics just wrapped up, which used to be something I didn't pay any attention to or care about at all. I'm traditionally not really a sports girly in any sense of the word. I was as a child, but that was nurture, not nature. But I do now, modern day, have one singular sport that I love and keep up with, and it's in the Olympics now, so I do suddenly care about the Olympics. And that sport is, of course, sport climbing. A quick, very simple explanation of sport climbing and how it works in the Olympics. It's a combo of 2 disciplines, lead climbing and bouldering. The bouldering round, which is my personal favorite, consists of 4 short but very difficult climbing problems that the climbers have to solve within a set time limit. Bouldering is done with no ropes. They just fall onto a giant crash pad, and they get unlimited attempts to solve each of the problems within the 4 or 5 minute time period. Lead climbing, on the other hand, is kind of what most people think of when they think of climbing. It's a much longer, higher route. It's done with a rope. For each round, there's just one single route that each climber is trying to climb, and the goal is to get as far into the route as possible, to climb as high as possible, and you only get one attempt to do so. I want to be so clear on a personal level, I am a very poor climber. I do it very casually, usually once a week, and I do a mixture of rope climbing, usually top rope, which is similar to lead climbing, and bouldering. But I do also watch the climbing competitions. There are a ton of them that happen mostly from spring to fall. And so I'm very familiar with almost all of the climbers competing at the Olympics and definitely had some rooting interest here. Going into the Olympics, I had one main rooting interest for the men and one for the women, both of whom are on the Japanese climbing team because the Japanese climbing team is stacked. They are so good. If the Olympics didn't have to be fair and include people from tons of countries, half of it would be Japanese climbers. They're so outstanding. So my fave for the men is Tomoe Narasaki, and for the women is Miho Nanaka. They're now both 2-time Olympians who both made it to finals in the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, but neither of them medaled, and it kind of broke my heart. The Olympic debut of sport climbing in the 2020 Olympics, aka 2021. That was the first time I'd ever watched a sport climbing competition, so these two were 2 of the first climbers I really watched and latched onto, so I've been rooting for them ever since. But then, of course, there's the issue of who are the actual favorites to win? Who is most likely to win? For the women, there was one option and one option only, really, and that was Slovenia's Janja Garnbret. Honestly, sometimes it seems like she's not human. In the 3 years that I've been watching climbing competitions, I don't think I've ever seen her lose a single competition. Brooke Rabatu from the US was another definite favorite to do well as some other circuit staples, Natalia Grossman, also from the US, and Jessie Pilz from Austria. The men's side was a little bit more interesting, with it being a bit of a battle between kind of staple older climbers who are reaching the end of their careers and these like new young guns coming up on the scene. On the older side, there were people like my boy Tomoe Narasaki, Adamandra, Alex Magos, and Jakob Schubert, with younger climbers like Sorato Anraku and Toby Roberts coming in guns blazing at just 17 and 19 years old, respectively. So there's a semifinals round and a finals round, and semifinals round saw lots of upsets, both in general and personally, because both of my Team Japan favorites didn't make it to finals. Both Tomoe and Miho are boulderers more than they are lead specialists, and they both had slips early in the lead climbing round that made them fall like just outside of a finals place. It was devastating to me. I genuinely watched Tomoe climb his lead route with like hands over my face and gasped when he fell early. It broke my heart because he was one of the last people to come out, so we knew he was not going to make it to finals when he fell that early, and it hurt. Natalia Grossman, who is another climber I really expected to see in finals, also missed out on a final spot, which was really shocking to me. So once we got to finals, I personally really started rooting for Jakob Schubert in the men's comp because he's been killing it lately and probably won't have another shot at an Olympic medal. He's 33, which is not old at all, but he was the oldest in the competition, period. But in the end, the young guns ended up coming out on top, with Great Britain's Toby Roberts taking gold and Japan's Sorato Anraku taking silver. But Jakob did come in third, which is also where he placed in the previous Olympic Games. So that got him another bronze medal, made me just a little teary-eyed. And I'm glad that he medaled again. Meanwhile, on the women's side, it ended up being more nail-biting than anyone could have imagined, because reigning gold Olympic medalist Janja Garnbret, unstoppable force of nature Janja Garnbret, actually did not complete one of the boulders in the finals round. No one did. And she also sustained a little bit of a finger injury on that boulder, so when she got to go do her lead route, everyone was terrified that the finger injury was going to ruin her chances of winning. But predictably, she ended up still clinching the win, with the US's Brooke Rabatou in a very close second, followed by Chessie Piltz in third. My highlight of the entire Olympics was Janja and Brooke's reactions when Janja won first and Brooke realized that she was second. It was really, really sweet. They ran and hugged each other. It was just a moment that really highlighted how much it meant to both of them, not just to win, but to win together. One of my favorite things about climbing, one of the best things about like the sport climbing circuit, is the really wholesome friendships that are created between people on opposite sides of the globe who never would have met otherwise. And there's just no purer representation of that than seeing Janja and Brooke just crying into each other's arms because they just won silver and gold at the Olympics. Anyone who watched that and didn't tear up a little bit, soulless, all of you. All right, so once again, we're moving from a very cute and wholesome thing into a gory affair. So technically, August is still summer. It's still hot outside, many places still haven't gone back to school, but from my point of view, August is back to school time, and school means fall, and fall means Halloween. So in my household, it's already spooky season, and if I'm honest, spooky season is basically just a year-long affair in my household because Halloween is my favorite holiday, and there's really no such thing as a wrong time for anything spooky or creepy. And most importantly for right now, there's never a wrong time for a horror movie. I'm actually not a big movie person in general. I prefer shows, but I am a big horror movie fan, and I tend to watch a lot of them during spooky season every year. Last year, I actually made a whole event out of it, tracking every movie, ranking them based on both a scale of favorites and scare factor. This year, I've basically started doing that same thing again. I tend to try to watch a horror movie like every night. Basically, it ends up realistically being kind of like every other night, but that's the goal. And teaser for next episode, I actually made a bucket list of horror movies to watch this year, and I will be running through that bucket list next time. On Instagram, I actually already posted this year's spooky season bucket list graphic because I do have a theme. So if you want a teaser for the next episode, definitely go head over to my Instagram, check out the graphic, give me a follow. The link's down in the description. As we know, based on my entire premise of this whole thing, niche references, I tend to get stuck into my niches, and because of that, there are some very famous horror movies that I've just never gotten around to, and it's kind of embarrassing to say I'm a horror fan and to say that I'm rarely scared of a horror movie, and then turn around and have to admit that I've never seen some like very big classic horror movies. Kinda kills my credibility a little bit. The list is a mix of classic horror that I haven't seen because I often don't like classic horror, and then some newer stuff that's really big, and some like spooky season movies that aren't horror but are ones I really should have seen at this point in my life. Also, a little teaser for this because I've actually already started on the list, and there's one famous iconic horror movie that was not actually intended to be on the list because I didn't really want to watch it, but I swapped it onto the list at the very last second, ended up watching it already, and it is now possibly among my absolute favorite horror movies of all time. Just goes to show that sometimes you actually don't know your taste that well. So, I think we finally come to the end of this very long list of things. I don't know how long this will be once it's edited, but I've been sitting here yapping for about an hour, so it's time to wrap things up. I've been consuming a lot of stuff. I've definitely very much been in consume mode rather than create mode, but we're back in create mode, and that's very exciting for me. It makes me feel like I'm actually being productive and getting stuff done instead of just rotting at home and inhaling snacks. As I just mentioned, the next thing I post will be me running through that list of my spooky season bucket list, and I've already got that almost ready to go, so it will probably just be out in a few days. Coming up after that is probably some more spooky season content and some more jet lag content, so if any of that sounds interesting and you haven't subscribed already, definitely subscribe and turn on notifications so that you'll know when all of that fun stuff gets posted. And of course, thank you for listening to me as I made some niche references.